And Suresh sir or Suresh sir, please, shall I say only in Malayalam or English, or can I use in Malayalam in between? Because I can see a number of students. So whatever you prefer, maybe I'll be comfortable. Please, sir. Suresh, sir.
It's preferable in English. If it is to include both languages.
Both languages, sir. Ma'am, both languages.
Both languages, sir.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Thank you. So, let me begin with the first question. What is nationalism? So before coming to Vivekananda, let me see, because today I'm expected to speak on the philosophy of nationalism. So what is nationalism is the first question. So nationalism, we can say, is the cherished feeling. I would like to put it like that. The cherished feeling or the attitude that the people of a nation have when they think about their national identity. So whenever I speak about or we think about nationalism, what comes to our mind is our good old school days, because each and every one of us had used to take the pledge. I'm an Indian and proud that I'm an Indian, isn't it? So my country, I'm proud of my nation, like that. So that kind of a nationalism, spirit of nationalism, of course, that we cherish from the very childhood days of ours. And another meaning of nationalism is the things that is done by the people of the nation. For example, if I say the Indians, so what as Indians we can do, then we will see that as a nation, Indians as a nation, how can we achieve self-determination? So that can be another meaning for nationalism. So maybe at least some of you will be feeling, then what is patriotism, isn't it? Are patriotism and nationalism different? Or can we say that patriotism is little more maybe aesthetic in its sense, and nationalism is too philosophical in its approach, I may say. So when I say patriotic or patriotism, it's something like the love for the country, the adoration for the country. That can be more like patriotism. So in nationalism also, of course, the spirit of patriotism comes because the cherished feeling that it's my nation, like that. So that also comes. Of course, there's no doubt for that. But that, of course, leads us to a very important question: what's a nation? So as a nation, of course, we can say it is the common bonding that exists between the people, because if there is no people, there is no nation, isn't it? It's the individuals or the community that make a nation. But of course, apart from the community, the nation has also a lot of other things, maybe the geographic factors, so many other factors, of course. But the common bond that exists between the people, then the ethnicity, language, culture, history, of course, philosophy, artistic forms, all these scientific, technological advancements, everything, of course, we can say. So all these things together form the very concept of nation, we can say. So what I would like to put here is, if we take the first type of definition, that is the cherished feeling that I belong to a particular nation, or I am an Indian, for example. So that kind of the cherished feeling. So what actually it implies? So that's my first point. What actually it implies? So it raises certain questions like, so it leads me to think about the origin of the nation, the ethnicity of the nation, the long heritage, the rich cultural heritage of the nation. Again, the prospects of the nation. Okay, so all these things are embedded in the very concept or in the very definition of nationalism itself. Now, with this brief introduction, how to understand this concept of nationalism, which I would like to take in a very broad sense, in a very socio-political and, of course, historical context, how this nationalism, the very idea of nationalism, can be explained through the lines of Swami Vivekananda. So, here I would like to say that Vivekananda has given his own views on nationalism, because one important feature about Swami Vivekananda is that if you try to understand either his humanistic philosophy or his social philosophy or maybe economic philosophy or even understand what is nationalism, it is not that you get the concept or the idea from a single book, because his thoughts and ideas are scattered all around his books, lectures. Maybe some of his very pertinent ideas are contained in his letters written to his friends or disciples or like that. So that is the very peculiarity of Vivekananda. And it is very interesting to see that Vivekananda has got a very unique concept of nationalism of his own. So he comes to the idea of nationalism from the very concept of nation itself. And before going to the concept of nationalism, he says that every nation, in fact, has something to fulfill. So when I say, or what is the significance of the very idea of nationalism? So the very spirit of nationalism, isn't it? Very philosophy of nationalism. It stands for something for a nation to do or to fulfill. Okay. So if a nation is to fulfill something, see, if as a human being I am to fulfill something, or if an educational institution, we have to fulfill something, we must have, first of all, a mission, isn't it? So this is the very idea of Vivekananda. So he says, every nation is born with a mission. And because there is a mission, every nation is born with a mission. It has some idea or it has some goal to be fulfilled or achieved. So every nation, of course, has its own past, its own peculiarity and individuality with which it is born. The social manners, the customs, and other, of course, cultural factors. And all these things are, in fact, molded in such a way so as to fulfill this purpose. Now, let me take our own Indian context. It's very interesting to see that art, culture, history, philosophy of India are intertwined like anything. For example, I would like to take the very concept of art, the aesthetic concept of the aesthetic vision of the Indians, the very concept of aesthetic experience, which the Indians would like to, or Indian philosophers would like to address as rasa, Haridas rasa, aesthetic experience. So it is nothing but an expression of India's own culture. Again, that reflects the history of India, the philosophy of India. And here we are very much interested in giving importance to the very content of the art form rather than the form of the very peculiar art. But perhaps maybe if we look at for example, if we look at the Greek art or any other art form, maybe they are more or less much interested in giving importance to the external form. So this is a very particular instance by which we can understand. For example, I would like to say, just think about the Ajanta Ellora caves, paintings one picture, very, very beautiful picture of Buddha, where only Buddha's feet is shown, is going upwards, upwards, and upwards. Nothing else. It's a very celebrated painting of that reflects what is Indian culture, that reflects what is Indian philosophy and Indian history. Simply, if one looks at the picture from the outside, maybe what's there in that picture? Simply the steps of a great personality is shown, maybe in different magnitudes and maybe in its three-dimensional effect. That maybe one can read that it brings us to the idea that the ultimate purpose of human life is to seek enlightenment. Or man can progress infinitely. So all this can be the different interpretations for that very beautiful, very celebrated picture that one can find in the Ajanta and Ellora case. So this is a celebration, I would like to say, of Indian culture, Indian art, Indian philosophy. So likewise, every nation, if we take, is born with a mission to fulfill, means its culture, its past, its history, its philosophy, ethnicity, all these are very much intertwined with each other. So, Vivekananda says, a nation is a portion of mankind viewed as a unit because of this perceptible spirit of purpose, which he called the national theme or national character. So every nation has got a national theme or a national character. Each nation, I would like to quote Vivekananda, has its own peculiar method of work. Some work through politics, some through social reforms, some through other lines. For that is the theme. The rest are the variations in the national life, in the national life music. So, national character or national theme or national idea is there, which makes a nation what it is, or which gives the very momentum for the very idea called nationalism. So in his view, every nation has a corresponding national idea. So this national theme or national character, of course, varies from nation to nation. The very national theme of India is different from that of Sri Lanka or from Pakistan or from Afghanistan or from any other nation. Any nation, of course, because every nation is unique. And so this preservation of this national theme, in Vivekananda's view, is very, very important for keeping up its nationalism. Preserving the national theme or the national idea is important for keeping up its spirit of nationalism. And according to him, maybe from whatever history has proved, perhaps, Vivekananda observes that political independence is the backbone of the French character. Okay? Because they calmly bear the political oppressions and all that. And with the English, maybe Vivekananda would like to say that they have got a very character of give and take policy. Okay? So they cherish business, or they're good at marketing or maybe trade, etc. But for India, he would like to say religion is the all important, or where he finds that spirituality is all important. But when I refer to the term religion in connection with Vivekananda, see, of course, we have to understand that term in a very broad sense. Because for Vivekananda, religion is being and becoming. He never wants to see that any kind of a parochial attitude or any kind of a narrowistic conceptions, Vivekananda could never tolerate. If there is one thing which he could never tolerate was, see, any kind of a narrow-minded tendencies. So Vivekananda, he would like to see religion, or by religion, as being and becoming. What are the possibilities of a human being? What all he can, what all he has achieved, and what all he can, if he can. And of course, he says that infinite are the possibilities of a human being. And the very bonding or the love that exists between a human being and another human being, which helps every human being to respect every other subject. So all these are highly important, says Vivekananda. So this is the very idea of religion. Because he says, I do not believe in a religion. He said, of course, all of us here know, which cannot bring bread to an orphan's mouth. So, see, that is the very purpose of religion. It is for man-making. It is for serving people. It is always for the cause of the other. It is always for upgrading or the upgradation of maybe the poor sections of the society or the nation. So that is the very idea of religion according to Vivekananda. So, because the very idea of God which Vivekananda has in mind, it can not be simply locked, I would like to say, in the four walls of a temple or in any other places of worship. And because he vehemently says, if you want to serve God in man. Seek God in human being. So that's the very humanistic tone of Vivekananda. And of course, that is his very idea of religion. So being and becoming. So first I have to be. And of course, let me help others also to become. And that is the very idea of religion. And it's such a kind of a very broadest conception of religion as the very national theme is what actually Vivekananda intends to speak about. Now, Vivekananda's view of nationalism, of course, it's a truism that he loved India like anything, because maybe you will be knowing that even Tagore said that if you want to know India, then please read Vivekananda or understand Vivekananda, because he was a contents in India. Because his understanding of India was not simply being done through some kind of an intellectual understanding, but something which he could cherish in, or he could make out by traveling all over the land, the nook and corner of the nation. Such a kind of an idea is Vivekananda has got about the very concept of, or the very cherished feeling which he has over India, I would like to say. So though India was everything for him, his idea of nationalism was never, he was first of all a humanist rather than a nationalist. So in his view, it's not simply the nation or the idea of nationalism that is important, but he cherished the very idea of internationalism or cosmopolitanism or world order, let me say. And he, of course, believed that each nation has to learn, and of course, that nation or the people of that nation, they will be good at that. And they will be rich with that particular tradition. But if we look at some other nation, maybe a very smallest of the small nations, we can say, they will also have something to contribute to others. Perhaps, or of course, we can also learn from, or big nations can also learn from any other small nation, I would like to say. And Vivekananda encouraged it like anything. So he said, it's an enduring, how can we have an enduring national spirit? He says that it is possible only the fusion of the national ideas. So, Vivekananda, if we take the context of India, and the India, I must say, the India of the times when Vivekananda came, where we were lacking, or what we were lacking in was not the kind of religious ideas or the spiritual ideas, I would like to say, but education or perhaps science, technology, technological advancement, etc. And in fact, what he preached and what he tried his best was to understand or to take science and technology from the West. Okay? And to give in return the tradition of that spiritual ideas which we have cherished for many, many years. So such a kind of a fusion of ideas was what Vivekananda in fact cherished. Because he never wanted to see that only our own nation flourishes. That is why I have told you that the very idea of nationalism in Vivekananda's view is never, it is not narrow. Because he couldn't tolerate any kind of a parochial attitude. So he loved Indians. Of course, he loved the Westerners, or I should say, he loved the entire humanity. So, speaking at the Parliament of Religions at Chicago, which is very, very famous, and of course, we are all very familiar with that. And I would like to quote a very important sentence here. Each must assimilate the spirit of other and yet preserve his individuality and grow according to his own law of growth. Time and again. So he exhorted that India has to contribute to the West, perhaps religion, and to accept science and technology from the West. And he wanted every nation to grow to its full stature and strength by holding to its life mission and thereby contributing to the sum total of the growth of the world. So that was his conception of nationalism. I think here I can very well relate it to the second definition of nationalism, which I have already stated. Where by nationalism, we simply does not mean the very feeling or the adoration that I belong to a particular nation, but maybe the kind of striving that as the citizens of a nation or as the people of a nation, we would take to achieve self-determination. So in that, and that determination or self-determination or every kind of a growth or every kind of its prosperity, everything shall ultimately for the growth of the entire world or the entire humanity. So that was his conception. So now is that.
Ma'am, your voice is not clear, ma'am.
But voice is not clear. Okay. Maybe I have some connectivity problem. Sir, is it okay that I
It's
switch
okay,
off my
ma'am.
video?
Now it is okay, ma'am. Now it is okay, ma'am.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So, the point which I have tried to bring home is, though he held that we should cherish the spirit of nationalism, or Vivekananda himself as a true nationalist, no love is greater than that of his country. No feeling is so intense as the desire for a cooperative commonwealth. So this is the very idea which Vivekananda had. And what is really the problem before us? It is to see how to enlarge the bounds of the political state and ultimately evolve a world state. So he was of firm conviction that a time must come when every person or every human being will be practical in the scientific as well as the spiritual level, and then that oneness will pervade the whole world. And in doing that, he exhorted Indians, especially the young generation of India, because we all know Vivekananda repeatedly said, "My hope lies in the younger generation." Why Vivekananda's hope lie in the younger generation? But before that, what kind of a younger generation he dreamt of? Vivekananda, of course, his dream was to have a nation of very, very energetic, enthusiastic, truth-loving, nation-loving, world-loving, or spiritual-seeking youngsters. So that was his dream. And he was of firm conviction that such a kind of a handful of youngsters would in fact bring a very prosperous world order. Now, with this brief introduction, let me try to see how Vivekananda understood the very society of India, or what is social evolution, or the evolution of Indian social philosophy in Vivekananda's views. When we speak about social philosophy, two things may come to our mind. One can be social determinism, and another one can be social dynamism. And let us see what was actually happening in the case of the Indian scene. So social determinism, it signifies an ideology which holds that man's existence is predetermined and that nothing can change his present social status. And social dynamism holds that man's existence is free and that man, or I should say human being, is a creative being who can change the social status by improving upon the conditions of life. Of course, there's no doubt everyone prefers the very idea of social dynamism. And if we look at the history of India, or I would say the evolution of Indian social philosophy, we can see that there was also a period when social determinism was also prevalent rather than social dynamism. Because it was substantiated and developed by the exploiting classes that eventually led to fatalism, but it was interpreted or misinterpreted in terms of perhaps divine predestination, or in terms of what Indian philosophers call the law of karma. What is that? The law of karma states that as we sow, so we reap. That is, if some portion of the society or some group of people, they suffer, it is because of their karma. It is divine destination. So there is such a theory. And there were a group of people who were taking advantage of this particular philosophical theory and exploiting the masses. And on the other hand, they were enjoying a lot of privileges. Vivekananda says, this is perhaps the very unfortunate thing that has happened in the evolution of Indian social philosophy. Because never cherished such a kind of a very wrong interpretation of this karma theory, which was being taken advantage by some of the so-called upper castes of the Indian society. And he's asking, what right you have? Looking at the upper caste or upper section of the society, he's asking, what right you have to have such a kind of a social determinism, the philosophy of social determinism. Instead, he preferred the philosophy of social dynamism, because the philosophy of social dynamism is an exotic call for a creative human being to bring out one's potential and, in fact, to change the social status and improve the life conditions. Of course, improve not only one's own life conditions, but also improve the entire status of the society itself. And if we look at the Indian history, we can see that the most primitive age in the Indian society had a very democratic social life, and which was based on freedom, equality, etc. There was a sort of social dynamism in social relations also. But it was later on thwarted, the social dynamism was thwarted by the introduction of maybe the crude religious practices like casteism, etc. Or, if I can use a word, theological fatalism. In the medieval age, we can say, is dominated by Brahmanism, fanaticism, casteism, fatalism of all these kinds, or authoritarianism. And the modern Indian age began with, of course, a lot of hopes and changes in the social outlook and human relationships. The social reformers and the leaders, not only Vivekananda, but also, an array of thinkers. They worked hard, I should say, and raised their voices against the philosophy of social fatalism. Because the medieval age, of course, they were trying to give a very dark picture or the very dark idea of what is called nationalism through their very wrong idea or philosophy of social determinism. But perhaps the biggest contribution of Swami Vivekananda was to root out such a kind of the philosophy of social determinism and to bring in the beautiful idea of social dynamism. So he shifted, or these people, I should say, not only Vivekananda, but all these social reformers of the Renaissance age of India, they shifted their emphasis from the individual to the social, from the communal to the national, and ultimately from the narrow religious to the broad human fields. So if you look at Tagore, Vivekananda, Aurobindo, or any other philosopher of that kind, freedom, democracy, humanism, these were the important ideals cherished by these thinkers. And when I said that Vivekananda identified religion as the very national theme through which the spirit of nationalism is to be molded, what I exactly mean is a reformed idea of religion. By reformed idea of religion, I mean never any kind of a theological fatalism. Never. He never had any such a kind of an idea. Never wanted to identify himself with any particular religion because religion was too big or too broad for him. So he couldn't find himself limited in one particular or a very narrow understanding or a concept of or an ideal of religion. But he believed in a religion which gives ample scope for man or any human being to develop, to bring out his potential. Because what is after all, what is the definition for religion after all for Vivekananda? Religion is the manifestation of spirituality or divinity in man. And what is education for Vivekananda? Education is the manifestation of perfection that is already in man. So perhaps by bringing these two very important ideas, that is religion and education, together, he could see that what we try to see from the outside through formal education and what we try to see through the inner development through what we call religion, both are not different. But how to bring out the potential, the creative potential, the infinite possibility. These are the terminologies that are used by Vivekananda. So he encouraged only, or he could tolerate only those things. Because if he couldn't tolerate any, he was intolerant of anything, that was perhaps weakness. And that can be weakness of mind, weakness of body, weakness of intellect, weakness of ideas. So such things he couldn't tolerate like anything. But whatever gives creative potential, whatever tries to bring out the infinite possibilities, whatever gives ample scope for the freedom of a person, whatever gives ample scope for the democratic, humanistic relations, that he welcomed like anything. So that was the very idea of religion for Vivekananda. So when he said that our nationalism shall be built up or it shall be maintained or developed with a very national theme called a religion, he never had any particular narrow understandings or any particular concept of religion. Now, so what I wanted to say here is the contribution which Vivekananda had done to the social evolution of India That is, philosophically speaking, he could do a kind of a paradigm shift from social determinism to social dynamism, I should say. Then he wanted to achieve a kind of a nationalism through, or a nation building through man making. So here, when I use the term man, see, it has nothing to do with the gender. Because at the time of Vivekananda, of course, he has used the term man. But for the present, we can say a human being or a human person. He wanted root and branch reform. And he wanted to achieve a kind of a nationalism through man-making. So he wanted that type of education or that kind of a social reform which would make for the individuals. So what is the very idea of a making of the individual? An individual of character. And at those times, we know only a certain section of the people, they were enjoying education. But Vivekananda could see that if India is to achieve its true development, or the spirit of nationalism is to be promoted, what is to be promoted first is education. Because education was perhaps the pivot of social reform. And in trying to improve the lot of the socially oppressed poor people, he wished to bring in a total change in their outlook and thus root out the cause of their degeneration. So, as a philosopher, I must say, Vivekananda was a social reformer, but he was a philosopher who tried to bring out some pivotal changes or pertinent changes in the social order. Therefore, he had a very clear mission or a method in his mind. And that method was the method of education. And he could see that the chief cause of our nation's ruin is due to the monopolizing of the whole educational system by a handful of rich men. Okay. So he shouted, and here I would like to quote the very beautiful words of Vivekananda. I call him a Mahatman. He means a great soul, whose heart bleeds for the poor. Otherwise, he is a Duratman, that is a wicked soul. So long as the millions live in hunger and ignorance, I hold every man a traitor who, having been educated at their expense, pays not the least to heed to them. Very important quotation of Vivekananda. So my point is, see, of course, he wanted to see that the spirit of nationalism is built up, or for that he wanted to see that our nation is built up. And in order to build up the nation, he first of all wanted to build up the individual, not a handful of individuals, but all the Indians, all of the Indians. He was not a utilitarian, perhaps, who never wanted to see the greatest number of the greatest people, but greatest good of the greatest number, but the upliftment and the good of all, perhaps the very idea of Sarvodaya which Gandhi had. So that was the very idea of Vivekananda. And not only that he wanted to see that every person in India is educated, but he also prepared a scheme for the education for India. And he said, what we want are, first he says Western science coupled with Vedanta, Brahmacharya as the guiding motto, and Shraddha and also faith in oneself. So we would like to have an education where we highlight the importance of science and technology. And of course, plus the ideas contained in Vedanta. And why he brings in Vedanta here is an important question. He would like to see Vedanta as a philosophy which would help us to live. By live, I mean sorry.
The voice is breaking, ma'am.
Voice bring answer. Okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
please continue.
So, okay. So that was the very kind of educational scheme which he preferred. So his educational scheme implied a perfect harmony of the body, mind, and the soul in their properly developed state. Again, he found that the national ideals are renunciation and service. So he recommended various qualities of this spirit of renunciation or the spirit of service, especially among the youth. Then coming to some of his political ideas, I would like to say. So in order to make effective the philosophy of social justice, in order to achieve that by bringing education as the method, or by educating especially the masses or the poor section of the India, and also by bringing in the importance of science, technology, the education relating to science, technology, and also achieving civic and technological developments in India. All these are the very methodical achievements which Vivekananda could bring in. And if we had the very ideal of politics, that is perhaps the last part of my talk today. Politics is only a part of the social scheme of life. That is the very idea of Vivekananda, because he believed that the function of the state is to watch the people and help the advancement of the scheme of life. So Vivekananda never gave that much importance to politics, but still he had visualized social and political unity of Indian nation. Of course, we can say. And rather than giving political ideas, he gave a very beautiful conception of the ideal social order. So in his opinion, ideal society is not merely theoretical concept which is unattainable. It can be achieved through the collaboration of the different classes or the different sections of the society, social partnership. And social partnership is slow of the state. So Vivekananda rather he wanted to have in his idea of nationalism, wanted to have. So here by nationalism I mean a kind of a self-determined conception of a nation. He wanted to have a perfect social order rather than a political state. So, if it is possible, he says, I would like to quote, to form a state in which the knowledge of the priest spirit, the culture of the military, the distributive spirit of the commercial, and the ideal equality of the last can all be kept, it can be an ideal state. So here, he would like to take root the political idea of caste. That is, what kind of a political situation we had in our ancient times. And of course, here he says, minus their evils. And such a kind of an ideal, the conception of an ideal state he wants to bring in. And then, so what I have tried to Vivekananda's nationalism is perhaps more humanistic or socialistic in its I would like to say social in its outlook, or rather than political in its nature. And our poet Rabindranath Tagore writes about Vivekananda as a nationalist. So here he says, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way to the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom. My Father, let my country awake. So this is perhaps a tribute given by Rabindranath Tagore to Vivekananda in his striving for what should I call nationalism or nation building. So I think I have taken a lot of time, and I'd like to conclude here. And thank you so much for patiently listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful words. And here is the time for discussion. Anyone who have any questions to ask, please unmute yourself and ask those questions, or else register it on the chat box.
You can even have observations, not only questions. If you have any disagreements or any comments also, it's our most welcome. Please.
Namaste, teacher.
Ranjit.
Very wonderful seminar. Very nicely present the divine socialism of Swami. Very fantastic.
Students can ask their questions. If questions are there, you can ask either in English or in Malayalam. No problem.
Good evening, teacher. I'm Sabina, teacher. Hello.
Yes.
ടീച്ചർ കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ?
Please.
ടീച്ചർ നാഷണലിസം പാട്രിയോട്ടിസത്തെ കുറിച്ചൊക്കെ സംസാരിച്ചപ്പോ എനിക്കൊരു ഡൗട്ട് ചോദിക്കാനായിട്ടുള്ള ഡൗട്ട് എന്നല്ല ഒരു നമുക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ആ വിവേകാനന്ദന്റെ ഈ നാഷണലിസം അതോ പാട്രിയോട്ടിസം ഇന്നത്തെ ഒരു സൊസൈറ്റിയിൽ ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ടുള്ള എന്തെങ്കിലും സജഷൻസ് ഉണ്ടോ ടീച്ചർ?
Perhaps that's a good question. What I personally feel is, എനിക്ക് വ്യക്തിപരമായി തോന്നുന്ന ഒരു ഒബ്സർവേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, വിവേകാനന്ദാകാശം എന്നുള്ളതാണ്.
Ma'am, your voice is breaking.
ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടോ? ഓക്കെ. അപ്പം വ്യക്തിയിലൂടെ സൊസൈറ്റി ഉണ്ടാക്കുക അല്ലെങ്കിൽ രാഷ്ട്ര നിർമ്മാണം എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലുള്ള ഒരു ആശയമാണല്ലോ മുന്നിൽ വെക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പം തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും ആ വ്യക്തി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് വിദ്യാഭ്യാസപരമായിട്ട് നമ്മളെ നല്ല രീതിയിൽ മുമ്പോട്ട് വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ. പക്ഷെ വ്യക്തികളുടെ ഒരു മുന്നിലുള്ള ആ ഒരു ഹ്യൂമനിസ്റ്റിക് ഫീലിംഗ് വിവേകാനന്ദ വളരെയധികം അതിലൂടെ ആണ് നമുക്ക് എന്നുള്ള ആ ഒരു ഫീലിംഗ്. അപ്പൊ ആ ഒരു ഫീലിംഗ് നമുക്ക് കൂടുതൽ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയെടുക്കാൻ ആവശ്യമാണെന്നാണ് ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നത്. Hello, Sabina, hope it is clear.
Yes, teacher. Okay, teacher, thank you.
Okay.
So, ma'am, on personal question, is many of them interpreted this nationalism. It's so many freedom fighters, so many philosophers, so many. My question is that is the philosophical concept of nationalism is acceptable, and in that time it is acceptable. Now it is acceptable, or if it is more valuable than the other philosophers propagated these nationalistic ideas.
Sir, actually, I wouldn't get your question. Can you put it
the question, what is
once more, sir?
the thing is that many of them propagated nationalist ideas.
Okay, sir.
The aggressive type and so many different type of nationalistic views, the nationalistic principle is propagated. My question is the Vivekananda's principle is more acceptable than other philosophers, in your opinion?
Oh, okay. But of course, there are a lot. If we take Vivekananda, or I mean, the nationalistic leaders of those times, Vivekananda or Tagore or Aurobindo, I would like to say that all of them have contributed equally, in the sense that perhaps if we take the very idea of Gandhi and the very idea of Vivekananda, their nationalistic ideas are almost one and the same, we can say, because they wanted to see that each and a nation is built up through the upliftment of each and every individual human being. And perhaps Vivekananda could foresee the kind of development that India needs through science and technology. Maybe in that he was far ahead, perhaps. I think is a nation itself a political conspiracy, national to create people. Nationalism, or the very idea of nationalism, is comes from the bonding, or the when people as a community exist together.
കോമേഴ്സ് സൊസൈറ്റിക്ക് വേണ്ടി ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ ഇന്നത്തെ തലമുറയിൽ അങ്ങനത്തെ റിഫോമേഴ്സ് ഒന്നും അങ്ങനെ കണ്ടുവരുന്നില്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ എണ്ണം കുറവാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അതിൻ്റെ കാരണം എന്താണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മുടെ തലമുറയ്ക്ക് കിട്ടേണ്ട ആ ഒരു അവയർനെസ് എന്താണ് എന്നുള്ളത്?
അത് ഒരുപക്ഷെ വിവേകാനന്ദന്റെയും ടാഗോറിന്റെയും ഒക്കെ ഒരു കാലഘട്ടം എടുക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്കൊരു റിനൈസൻസ് പീരീഡ് ആയിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ഒരുപക്ഷെ പറയാം. അന്ന് ഒരു നവോത്ഥാനം ആവശ്യമായി വന്ന ഒരു കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ ഇന്നും നമ്മുടെ ഇടയിൽ റിഫോമേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കാം. ഇനി നമ്മൾ ആരും തിരിച്ചറിയാത്ത റിഫോമേഴ്സ് നമ്മുടെ ഇടയിൽ ധാരാളം ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കാം. ഒരുപക്ഷെ നമ്മളത് അറിയാത്തതായിരിക്കാം എന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്. Okay, Anaka, for a very pertinent question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kubika?
Anyone have anything to ask? Shall we close the discussion session?
Yes, yes.
Yes. I kindly invite
Okay.
Dr. Suresh sir to extend the vote of thanks for the online lecture series.
Here I am obliged to extend the vote of thanks. I express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Deepthi, HOD, MS University, Tirunelveli, who inaugurated the lecture series. Now I thank Dr. R. Lashmi, the resource person, who gave us a comprehensive idea on the topic Swami Vivekananda and the philosophy of nationalism. I convey my heartfelt gratitude to her. I convey my sincerest gratitude to Dr. Suraj, HOD History, who offered the welcome speech. I would like to thank all my colleagues and staff. Now I thank all the teachers, students, researchers, scholars, and well-wishers and staff who took part in this lecture series. I convey my special thanks to Dr. Sindha GS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So once again, thank you, Suresh sir and Suresh sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
From Patna, Bihar, sir.
You are from Patna. Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's a news channel or anything is in your logo.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's in Patna. What is a philosophical channel or anything?
Digital channel, sir.
What, sir?
Digital channel, sir.
Digital channel. Okay. It's a good thing. Is you?
Thank you, sir.
The channel is operated by you and or a trust or anything? Is only philosophical aspect or is any history or other subject we can inform you?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, you are in the group of University College. Okay, that is logo.
B.R. Ambedkar, sir. B.R. Ambedkar, Bihar University, Muzaffarpur.
Okay, Muzaffarpur. Okay, sir. Sir, it's my version number is in your hand, or you send it's in the WhatsApp. I think.
Send sir chat box. Send sir chat box.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. My mobile number is on the chat box. If you send the details of your digital channel, if any other seminars, if it is only published on or to the seminars of philosophy or other subjects. Can we share, sir?